The morning light moved slowly through the small kitchen window, touching the edge of a wooden table that had seen many years of use. An 87-year-old grandmother sat there, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. The steam rose in a soft, steady way, like a quiet breath. Across from her stood her 4-year-old granddaughter, balanced on tiptoe, trying very hard to reach a bowl of cereal without spilling it. The grandmother watched her with calm eyes and a small smile. Life had become slower with age, but it had also become deeper. Every small moment felt important now. The grandmother's hair was silver and thin, pulled back neatly. Her face held lines that spoke of work, love, loss, and patience. She had lived through times when the world felt heavy, and times when it felt hopeful. She had raised children, buried friends, and learned how to sit quietly with memories without letting them hurt too much. The little girl had soft hands and bright eyes. She did not yet know what the lines on her grandmother's face meant. She only knew that this was the safest place she had ever known. They were getting ready for a long day. The grandmother moved carefully, leaning on the counter for balance as she reached for a coat. Her bones felt stiff, and her breath came slower than it once had. The granddaughter watched her closely, copying her movements as if this was a game. When the grandmother smiled, the child smiled back. When the grandmother paused, the child paused too. Their lives were moving at very different speeds, but somehow they were in step. Outside, a car waited. The grandmother took the little girl's hand, and they walked together, step by step. The air was cool and clear. The sky looked wide and calm. Neither of them spoke much. They did not need to. They shared a quiet understanding that today mattered, even if they did not yet know why. The drive was long, but gentle. The granddaughter fell asleep with her head against the grandmother's arm. The grandmother did not move, even when her arm began to ache. She remembered holding her own children like this, long ago, and she felt time fold in on itself. The road stretched ahead, and with every mile, the grandmother felt a mix of peace and worry. She wondered if she was doing the right thing. She wondered if her body would hold up. She wondered if this moment was worth the effort. When they arrived, the building stood tall and bright. There was a quiet energy in the air, a feeling that something important happened here. People walked with purpose. Voices echoed softly. The grandmother took a deep breath and straightened her coat. The granddaughter woke up and looked around with wide eyes, holding her grandmother's hand tighter than before. Inside, they waited. Time moved slowly, like honey dripping from a spoon. The grandmother sat in a chair, her back straight, her hands folded. The granddaughter swung her feet, humming to herself in a soft, uneven tune. People passed by, some nervous, some excited, some lost in thought. No one paid much attention to the old woman and the small child. They looked ordinary. They blended into the background. As they waited, the grandmother's thoughts drifted. She remembered a time when her voice was strong and steady. She remembered singing in her kitchen while cooking, singing to her children at night, singing to herself when the house was empty. Singing had always been a quiet friend, something she carried with her even when life grew loud and hard. But over the years, her voice had grown thin. Her hands shook. Her breath shortened. She had stopped singing out loud, afraid that the sound would not match the memory. The granddaughter tugged at her sleeve. The grandmother looked down and met her eyes. The child smiled and whispered something that only they could hear. The grandmother nodded. Whatever fear she carried softened a little in that moment. Soon, they were called forward. The lights grew brighter. The space opened up. The stage felt large, almost too large, especially to someone so small and someone so old. The grandmother walked carefully, one step at a time. The granddaughter walked beside her, proud and steady. The room grew quiet. Simon Cowell sat at the table, watching with a calm, practiced look. He had seen many people walk onto this stage. He had seen hope, fear, confidence, and doubt. He had seen young voices and old voices. But something about this pair made him sit a little straighter. Perhaps it was the contrast. Perhaps it was the way the grandmother held the child's hand, not as a guide, but as a partner. The grandmother stood still for a moment. She felt the weight of the room, the lights, the eyes. She felt her heart beating slowly but firmly. She closed her eyes and took a breath. The granddaughter squeezed her hand. The grandmother opened her eyes again. They began together. The sound was soft at first, almost fragile. The grandmother's voice carried a gentle tone, shaped by years of living. It was not loud. It did not rush. Each word seemed to take its time, resting in the air before moving on. The granddaughter joined in with a clear, simple sound, her voice light and honest. It did not try to be perfect. It simply was. The two voices moved together, not in perfect balance, but in a way that felt true. The grandmother's voice held depth and memory. The child's voice held wonder and trust. They did not try to impress. They did not try to compete. They shared the song like a story told slowly at the end of a long day. As the song continued, the room changed. People leaned forward without realizing it. Breathing slowed. Thoughts quieted. The grandmother felt her fear fade. She felt her body relax. She was no longer thinking about age or weakness. She was thinking about the moment. She was thinking about the child beside her. The granddaughter watched her grandmother closely, matching her pace. When the grandmother paused, the child paused. When the grandmother softened her voice, the child softened hers too. It was not something they had practiced in a formal way. It was something they had learned by living together, by listening, by loving. Simon Cowell's expression shifted. He was used to judging technique and performance. But this was different. This was not about skill alone. This was about connection. He felt it in the way the grandmother stood, steady but humble. He felt it in the way the child trusted without question. As the final note faded, there was a moment of complete silence. It was not an empty silence. It was full, heavy with feeling. Then, slowly, the room responded. Applause rose, not loud at first, but deep and steady. People stood. Some wiped their eyes. Some smiled without knowing why. The grandmother looked down at her granddaughter. The child looked up, beaming. They had finished. Whatever happened next felt less important than what had already occurred. Simon Cowell leaned forward. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but softer than usual. He talked about time. He talked about how rare it was to see something so honest. He talked about how age and youth had met on that stage, not as opposites, but as companions. The grandmother listened quietly. She did not feel proud in a loud way. She felt full. She felt like something inside her had settled into place. The granddaughter swung her feet again, happy and unaware of the weight of the moment. Then came the gentle twist. Simon Cowell stood and walked closer. He spoke not about the future of the show, but about the present. He spoke about how moments like this reminded people why stories mattered. He did not rush. He did not raise his voice. He simply acknowledged what had happened. The grandmother felt tears in her eyes, not from surprise, but from release. She had carried her voice quietly for so long. She had thought that part of her life was over. Standing there, with her granddaughter, she realized that nothing truly shared is ever lost. They left the stage together, hand in hand. The lights dimmed behind them, but the feeling stayed. Backstage, the world returned to its usual pace. People moved quickly. Voices overlapped. But the grandmother and the child moved slowly, as they always did. Later, in the quiet of the evening, they sat together again. The granddaughter rested her head against the grandmother's side. The grandmother's body felt tired, but her heart felt light. She thought about all the years she had lived, and all the years the child had yet to live. She thought about how rare it was to meet in the middle like they had. The granddaughter hummed softly, the same uneven tune from earlier. The grandmother joined in, just under her breath. There was no stage now. No audience. Just the two of them, sharing sound and silence. The day faded gently into night. Outside, the world continued as it always did. Inside, something had changed, quietly and deeply. The grandmother knew that no matter what came next, this moment would stay with her. It would live in her memory, warm and steady, like the light through the kitchen window at the start of the day. And as the granddaughter drifted to sleep, still holding her grandmother's hand, the grandmother closed her eyes and rested. She felt no need to hurry. She had given what she could, and she had received more than she expected. In the slow rhythm of shared breath and quiet song, life felt complete, just as it was.